And I did the first.
Take one, excuse me.
Yeah. When it first started, whoops, our association first started.
Yeah, I don't have any idea. I mean, yeah, you did a
We-
fair amount of work.
Let's see, I think one of the first things I did was for the skating rink.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early things.
Yeah, that one didn't last long. I have a friend of mine that was one of his big investments.
Yeah.
After that, he said he did not do that anymore.
All right, go ahead and take it when you're ready, Todd.
How'd you get into the sign business?
Born in it.
Tell
My
me about-
father started the Roy C. Kinsey Sign Company in 1907.
Can we start that again? Because I talked over you. Just start with my father. My father started.
Okay. My father, Roy C. Kinsey Sr., started the Roy C. Kinsey Sign Company in 1907 while he was living with his mother and father at 19 East Campbell Avenue. And he was 14, and he inherited his artistic ability from his mother. And he started doing little small signs. He did work for some of the theaters at the time, doing the show bills, what's showing and what's coming, and little handbills for grocery stores and various things that he could do, in a little area that he had to work in. So that's how he got started.
When did you start? When did you start working in the family business?
About 1948 or 9.
What did you do when you first started?
What did I do?
What did you do when you first got started?
Well, of course, I had other training because we lived on a dairy farm where a countryside golf course now is. My mother and father bought a farm, 114-acre farm with a early American brick house on it in 1925 and moved in it when I was 5 months old. And he loved animals, and he had a purebred Guernsey dairy herd, which was just beginning at that time. He'd had about a half a dozen cows since 1919, and they were milking them by hand. And then they bought that place and built barns, milking barn, and had machines and whatnot to begin operating. Grade A, raw, certified milk, Guernsey milk. And we sold milk to the Hotel Roanoke and residents of South Roanoke, peddled it. So when you grow up on a farm, you get a lot of experience and learn a lot of things when you're just growing up. But anyway, we had our own workshop and built our own equipment, some of it, and maintained what we had. So I already, had mechanical training. I'd been in Roanoke College, and I was majoring in physics. And I'm a mechanic inclined. My father was an artist inclined. Brother Roy inherited more of the artistic ability, and my brother Warren and I were more the mechanics. And that was the beginning. Well, when we were already, 1933, my dad put in the first neon sign plant in the state of Virginia. At that time, the Patrick Henry Hotel already had 2 neon signs that were made by the original Claude Neon Sign Company from France. And so when 1948, I was still in Roanoke College, and we built the big sign that was on the Dan River Mill in Danville. Roof sign that it read top line, home of, bottom line, Dan River Fabrics. The DR and F each were 20 feet tall. The sign structure was 50 feet high and 248 feet long. It was a pretty good size, and it stayed there until just several years back.
Do you remember the Star going in?
The Star?
Yes,
Do I remember it? I helped do it. That was my father's idea. And he sold the idea to the Retail Merchants Association and the Chamber of Commerce. And then it was up to Warren, Roy, and I to make it a reality. Now that was an entire year's advertising budget of those two organizations spent to make the Mountain Star and 100 little ones downtown.
Now we know where the Mountain Star is. What happened to the 100 little ones? You got any idea?
Yeah,
Tell me.
got a whole history on them. The city of Roanoke used them for 30-some years. We put them up the first year, 48, we had 49, I'll get my 2 and 8 numbers mixed. 1949, this city was just discontinuing the streetcars. And beginning of 1950, they put up new street lights. The old ones were low, 12, 15 feet tall. The new ones were about 30 feet tall, and most of them still are on the streets. Downtown, they reverted. They took those out and put back the little short one, just in a couple of streets. And we used those then, from then on, to hang the stars on. First couple of years, we hung them right underneath the light. Well, that was way up in the air, and you had to look up to see them. So then we made a bracket to hang it about halfway down the pole, and we would bring a garland of greens with light bulbs in it, wrapped around the pole, and then around the star, and then back over the pole and back down. Each of those poles had a place that you could plug it up, so it made it easy. Before that, we had the very first year, it was tough to find a place to hang them, because there wasn't any big pole. After the city of Roanoke quit using them, because we kind of worn them out, because we'd bring them in and store them from Christmas season to Christmas season. And they'd get broken handling them. We had to keep repairing them, repainting them, so forth. But they were double-face neon. Transportation Museum has one hanging in it. It's a neon is blue. They were 4 different colors. They had red and gold and green and blue. Had 4 different colors of neon. And the garland had light bulbs of multicolors to go with it. And we did a lot of other Christmas decorations, put up things for American Theater and Smart Irving Sachs and Hieronymus. I've got pictures I can show you of Hieronymus that are interesting. But it's all advertising.
What did people think when the star went on?
Well, most people thought it was fine, but there were people that didn't like it. Vern Ewart didn't care for it. Yeah, and it was just a tacky neon star. People thought of neon automatically as tacky. M. Carl Andrews hated it. He was became chairman of the Middle Mountain committee that, look after. Every now and then, because he was an editor, one of the editors for the newspaper, and he'd put an article in the paper trying to start a campaign to have it moved. He wanted it over on Reed's Mountain, or he just wanted it somewhere else besides on Mill Mountain. Hated it. A little bit of irony. If you go up to the star, walk out on the viewing platform, and look over the edge, there's a bronze plaque there that you read standing there on it, dedicated to M. Carl Andrews. The star's shining right down on him day and night.
Why do you think? Why do you think it's? Well, tell me about some of the most the jobs you've done over the years, and the jobs that stick out to your mind, especially the ones in town.
Well, there are a lot of little quirks you can tell you. It's like the star. one thing people don't know, they had just discontinued the streetcars and had taken down the trolley wire. Well, it was just rolled up and rolled to the junkyard. And in the process of putting in the foundation for the Star, we went down and got a whole lot of that wire. While the trenches were dug out and the concrete blocks that support the Star were open, or it was dug out, forms were built and they were poured into forms. They were not just poured into a hole. And we took that wire and wound it all around in those foundations, a whole lot of it. And each of the seven legs of the steel frame come down and bolt to those concrete blocks. And where each leg comes down, we bring that wire up and wrap it around one of the bolts, so that mesh of wire is connected to every leg of the steel frame, front and back. So it never gets struck by lightning. It's got enough grounding system that it never builds up a positive charge and never attracts lightning. It prevents it from building up a charge, which the lightning strike originates from the bottom, bottom up.
How does it make you, I mean,
That's just a little item that it's there, but nobody, it wasn't in the specifications. It wasn't, nobody knows. Unless you go look, you can see it where it comes up to each bolt.
did y'all have any idea when you were doing this that it would be something that 50 years from now, everyone would call Roanoke the Star City of the South? When visitors come, that's the first place they took them. Did you have any idea that that was what you were?
Had no idea whatsoever. When we built it, it was strictly a Christmas decoration. And they didn't even plan to burn it except just during the Christmas season. It's turned on Thanksgiving Eve and then runs till New Year's, right after New Year's. That was the plan. Well, now, of course, it burns continuous. And we get notes, because they were all, every now and then somebody would say something about it, and there'd be a response in the paper. Don't throw rocks at our star. I've got a copy of several of things like that. And nowadays, children go up and students and whatnot, they take pictures of it. There's one in the paper just recently. They write articles about it. I've got a copy of what one student wrote just as a school project. And we had no idea they would, the public would fall in love with it. That was total surprise, I think, to everybody. But it is. It's just become an icon, and soon be 63 years.
How does that make you feel to know that your family accomplished that? I mean,
Well,
there's been a bunch of great artists and creative people who've done amazing things, but from a simple sign company, you guys did.
Yeah. My dad was quite. He only had an 8th grade education, but one of the Hobby Brothers, you remember the Hobby Brothers, Hobby Piano Company or Music Company on Church Avenue? There was a bunch of boys, and one of the Hobby Brothers told me one day, this was years ago, he said, I was in school with your dad, and I can remember seeing him sitting in school. He had his geography book open. But inside he had a sketch pad, and he was practicing sketching letters. So that was his natural talent. Plus the fact that he was a good businessman, knew how to, and had talented people that worked for us.
Why do you think it's important to have a good sign company, good graphics, good clean visuals in a town like ours? What difference does that make?
Well, a little history of the city. We were virtually nothing. We'd had 2 little villages started and failed, and finally the third one, Big Lick, gained some size and had some influential people living in it. Okay. We had the one railroad, which came through in 1852, east-west. And then when the Clark brothers brought the Shenandoah Valley Railroad to Roanoke, to Big Lick, it automatically became Roanoke. Well, my great-grandfather and grandfather both were farmers and residents of Franklin County over near Burnt Chimney. And they were both called wheelwrights. They were the transportation engineers of their day. They built wagons. In the summertime, of course, they'd raise tobacco for a money crop, but they would build wagons and sell them to farmers, to travelers, people wanting to go west, like a covered wagon, Conestoga wagon type. But you'll see in the old pictures of the market, lots of farmers with a wagon that has similar looks. They're not as big as a Conestoga, but they're, had the sloping ends and the canvas top and whatnot. They'd come in and bring produce to the market. My grandfather was born in 1853, and when the railroad came, he was right at 30 years old, right at his prime. And being a combination of carpenter and blacksmith, he immediately picked up his blacksmith tools and came to Roanoke because he could see what was happening, all this burst of growth and work, building all this stuff at the railroad started to build. And there were brick houses and frame houses and all this stuff, and all the people would need wagons to haul supplies, materials to the site, including the Dyerleys were making a lot of brick out at Cave Spring. So he came out and opened a blacksmith shop at Cave Spring. Then, 1888, he's already working for the railroad, helping build railroad cars. My father comes along 1893, and everything is booming. And that automatically made a market for advertising. You look at a lot of the old pictures, they're all just, every building has something painted on it almost. There's a little article in the newspaper, it was just recently, I think it comes from Raymond Barnes' book about my dad building one of the largest signs in Roanoke on Campbell Avenue for a company that apparently was sort of like a bargain house. But I have no picture of it, have no idea what it looked like. Whether it was something painted on a wall or whether it was a structure or not, I don't know. But it comments about young artist Roy Kinsey building this large sign in downtown Roanoke. So it made an automatic, situation where he was, if he worked at it, nothing keep him from being successful. There was so much going on. 1925, they built a whole lot of stuff. Patrick Henry Hotel, Colonial Bank, First Baptist Church, and Calvary Baptist Church, all built new sanctuaries. A lot of stuff was going on during that era, and that's when he was able to prosper in the sign business. Enough so to go out and buy a 114-acre farm. So that's kind of the beginning of how the railroad was really the birth of the whole area. That was the very beginning. Up to that point, we were just piddling along. So the history of Roanoke goes, built around that.
You got a lot of Kinsey in the history of Roanoke, don't you?
Well, it affected the Kinsey family. I don't know if we made all that much contribution, but it sure did affect the Kinsey routine. My grandmother ran a boarding house from 1900 to 1913. And then when my grandfather had retired, and they bought a house out on Franklin Road, 1510 Franklin Road. Supposed to have been, I'd like to get some more research on it. I think it was the first or second house built on Franklin Road. And the story is that somewhere in the building of the railroad, and later on I don't know where they were working, but they set off a charge where they were grading, and it blew a rock loose, rolled down the hill, and destroyed a current house. And the railroad awarded the owners of the house $10,000. And they bought practically a whole square on Franklin Road. They had to have a stable and all that goings on. They had a servant's house, all there on that location. And my grandmother and grandfather were able to purchase it in 1913. I have a picture of the house, several pictures, but this one is the entire Kinsey family at that point assembled on the front porch of the house. 21 people. My older brother Warren was not a year old. My dad's holding him.
Well, not many people have worked with as many folks as you have over the years in Roanoke. Of all the executive marketing and advertising people that you worked with through the years, who stands out as an admirable person and why?
Well, after the main sign company was sold, I started the operation of my own, just by myself. I knew who did what and where to get what. Chip Harris at the Roanoke Times and World News and I got together when they discontinued the Roanoke World News. Did away with the old, it was Roanoke Times and a big stylized ampersand Roanoke Times, Roanoke World News. And that were the signs on the building where the plant is. I worked with Chip to change that to just the Roanoke Times. And I worked with him then. Later on, I did the big letters on the printing building up the top, 6-foot letters up there. And I did when they built the plant, I did the interior signage and a plaque inside. And you got the walkway across the street. Well, then later on, I did the work. They rented a building over right next to the railroad. There, just beyond Yellow Cab, right at Yellow Cab, the old location, that they used for their distribution center to the carriers. They would take a whole bunch of newspapers over there. The route people would come in and get their allotment and pick it up. And for the time that they were there, I think it was about 5 years, we built a sign that was hung on the side of the end of the building, rather, that faces 581, and their newspaper would put their ads on it. It now just has a blank ad. Nobody's in the building, and it can't be used except whoever's in the building. You can't put an ad on it for somebody off premises because that's a permit requirement.